And my name is Ann Dolan. I'm the president and founder of Educational Connections Tutoring. And over the years, I've seen quite a bit of unmotivated students, both in the classroom and certainly through our tutoring and educational coaching practice as well. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. You should see a chat box in your Zoom window, and there you can type in questions to us so that we can answer questions along the way. So we'll have a Q&A at the end, but also if you have a question as we're going along, something that one of us says, please feel free to introduce yourself, type in your question, and then Rochelle, who I also have on the line, will read that question. Okay, so motivation, oh my gosh, it's such a hot topic. You know, as a teacher, I always wondered why some of my students were motivated internally and others weren't. And why some were motivated, for example, in reading and writing, but not in math. And it just always, that question was always in the back of my mind during my teaching career. You know, I saw so many different kids with so many issues along the way. I just wanted to share with you 3 of my 6th grade students. These kids I vividly remember because they really represent still the population of students we see today in my tutoring practice. First was Carl. Carl was an incredibly bright kid. In fact, he was doing math at a high school level. He was clearly very smart, but he put forth very little effort in his daily work. And he would really only study when he had to get a decent grade. But instead, he relied on his ability to retain information that was really easy for him. So he never really had to put forth too much effort. Sarah was different. Sarah loved to learn. She readily completed her homework. Her mom never really even had to ask her much what she had to do. And she was just kind of one of these naturally curious learners. And then there was David. David really struggled to stay organized. He didn't always do his homework, but even when he did, he couldn't find it when I called for it the next day. He had a hard time remembering what he had to do because he didn't always write down his assignments. Although he struggled in school, he really loved to read nonfiction. So all these years, I've really wondered, why are some kids intrinsically motivated and others are extrinsically motivated? So an intrinsically motivated student is really curious. They're a natural learner. They're just kind of interested in learning. They take pride in doing well and getting good grades. Whereas other kids seem to be extrinsically motivated. They'll do the work, but only because they want to get that good grade. Or, you know, what's popular here is paying kids for grades. They'll do the work, but only if they have some positive result from the parent, like paying for grades. So here's the question, why is this? Well, here's what I know, and I know Rachna can share the same thing, that motivation is complicated, and there's not a one solution fix. We were just talking about it the other day. You know, we want an app for everything. Tell me how I can fix this situation. But it's a little bit tricky. However, as parents, we can make the environment ripe for motivation. There are definitely things we can do as parents. So in order to be intrinsically motivated, you have to have 3 things. First of all, you have to have the confidence, the thought that you can do this, that you have the skills, you have enough self-esteem to be able to power through something and get it done. You have the skills to complete that math homework, for example. Autonomy, that you have the ability to do it on your own terms, when and where you want. And then that it's purposeful to you. You know, so many kids will say, why do I have to know the Pythagorean theorem? Am I really going to use this in life? And so when kids ask us questions like this, they're really searching for purpose, because purpose drives intrinsic motivation. So it all boils down to the question, how do we motivate our kids? Is it rewards? Is it punishments? Or is it a little bit of both or none of the above? So luckily, to sort through all this today, I have my friend and colleague, Rachna Varia. And Rachna, as you know, is a psychologist and works with issues like this all the time with kids that she sees. So Rachna, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today. I know we're having an issue with your video, but can you hear me right now?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, awesome. So Rachna, tell us first of all what you do.
So I've been a psychologist for 20 years and working with children as young as age 4 and then through adulthood. And we're really working with kids in terms of how they view the world, how they view themselves, if there are any learning differences, executive functioning, but also if there might be an issue with anxiety or depression or mood, which are obviously really important factors in motivation and, more importantly, just in general well-being.
Great. So I know you do testing and then you also do some therapy too.
Absolutely. So MindWell is actually made up of 18 psychologists, and about half of our psychologists do testing, again, focused on either learning differences, developmental issues, emotional issues, and then the other half actually focus on therapy, which is when a child, especially in this Northern Virginia environment, is so stressed out and the family is stressed out. What can we do to change the family environment and how just the child, him or herself, views the world around him?
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. So here's a big question. Really, what are some things that you see with these students? What are some commonalities across the board with kids that struggle with motivation?
Actually, lots of different things. People might have a lack of motivation for different reasons. So for some kids, it's really coming from a place of anxiety. That how about if I try and I still don't get what I want, or I don't get that A? There's that fear of rejection. And so basically not wanting to put themselves out there at all. So there was this amazing study that showed that when kids are complimented on being smart, you are really smart at that they actually don't take more risks and are not motivated to do harder tasks. Why? Because they're afraid that they might look not smart. So one of the pieces of advice that we always give to parents is praise the effort and not praise the intelligence. You're working really hard at this versus you're smart at this, because then they can get a sense of they're in control of their own destiny. But a lot of other reasons to not be motivated. It's a little tough where we live, where everyone is, or you feel like everyone is so high achieving, you think you're falling behind, you're competing against others instead of competing against yourself. And then parents might be putting on too much pressure on their kids, and they may be reliving their own successes or failures and projecting it onto the child, and the child wants nothing to do with that.
That's interesting. Rachna, sometimes parents will call us and they'll be looking for an educational coach or a tutor, and they'll say, you know what, I don't really think there's anything wrong with my child. I think he's just plain old lazy. Is that a thing?
We hear that all the time. My child's just lazy. But lazy is an adjective, and we need to find out, why do you think your child is lazy? Is it coming from maybe a low arousal level, which could be a type of ADD? Could it be coming from feeling depressed and sort of just a lack of self-efficacy, that no matter what I do, it doesn't seem to matter? Could it be coming from being addicted to video games? Could it be coming from, just having some social issues? So lazy is such an overarching term. I would really encourage parents to think about what it means for their child that they're not following through on something.
That makes complete sense. So speaking of parents, what are just some little things that parents can do if they find themselves in this situation where, their child may not be putting forth as much effort as they think the child could be doing?
Yeah. One big step is to really encourage the child to find their own solutions. As parents, we try to sweep in and figure it out for them and find the solution. Like, okay, let's go through your agenda, or let's figure out a calendar. But instead, we really need to encourage these kids to find their own solutions. And for some children, that feels really good. Like, okay, I'm in charge of this and I can do something about it. I would also really encourage parents to model their own struggles with motivation. So I'm a big fan of studies, but there was an amazing study that just came out of MIT a couple months ago. And it showed that when kids as young as 15 months observe their parents struggling with something, just like trying to get a key off a carabiner, they would actually persist in playing with their toy longer than someone when they watched an adult who did it easily. So we need to model and show our kids that life is hard, but how do we persist through it? How do we get to the other side? And there are rewards at the other end.
And Rachna, or Anne, I have a parent who wants to talk about the role the diet plays, if there's any motivation in that. Can diet control mood?
I know that there have been some studies looking at kids that, may have not enough energy to complete homework. And yes, it can contribute to a lower than would be expected mood. But certainly, there is something to breaks. And in fact, I went to see Dan Pink speak the other day. And some of you might know who Dan Pink is. He's a pretty famous author. He wrote a book called Drive, and it's all about motivation. He just came out with a new book called When. And when is about the timing at which you do things. He says the timing at which you do things is actually a science. It's not an art. And you should do certain tasks at certain times of the day. For example, when you're fresher in the morning, you should do more analytical tasks that require a lot of focus. But in the afternoon, there's like this trough where people feel less motivated. So for our students, it's coming home from school. And that's why breaks are important, because if they have something to eat and something to drink, something with a little bit of glucose, it kind of gives them a second wind to be able to sustain more effort. So I don't know the exact question about what in the diet, but I do know that having something to eat and drink and having a break is very successful at elevating mood and kind of breaking through that trough. He also stated that in the late evening or early evening after dinner, that you kind of get like this second wind, and then you're kind of at another high almost. So in the morning you have this high, then you have this low mid-afternoon, and then you're kind of back to almost that high again, where you feel motivated again. And I do believe that's why a lot of older kids do wait until late at night to do their work. But certainly if they could have a break and even start to lay out their assignments right before dinner and then start after that, that can be helpful.
Yeah, and I agree with Anne. I think obviously diet plays a big role, but it depends on the child. And if the child has a more vulnerable digestive system, whether it's for gluten issues, allergies, we're seeing a lot more kids with Lyme's disease. There's been more research about kids with ADHD and the role of sugar and preservatives. But again, it depends on the child, and it's really going to be a matter of tracking it for your own child.
Rachna, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about rewards and punishments, because sometimes parents will say, I'm not sure if I should, dangle a carrot or treat it with a stick. What have you found to be successful in rewarding or punishing?
In general, and this is a generalization, but I don't think punishment is very effective. That's coming from almost a place of shame. And for kids, they're like, okay, if you want to take my screen time away, fine. If you want to take this away, fine. What we hear a lot of is parents say the kids don't even seem to care that if we're taking everything away, because they have no control over it. Now, the rewards, though, have to be intrinsically rewarding. So I worry a little bit about just, rewarding with money or rewarding with things. Can it come from a place of, wow, you did a really good job at this. I saw you put in a lot of effort. We're going to have some special time where we go shopping together. Or I saw you put in a lot of effort. Let's think about, something special that we can do over spring break. So again, if you are going to reward the effort and not just the final outcome.
And do you find that rewarding something shorter term is a little bit better? For example, I had this parent come up to me after a talk one day, and she said, I was at an elementary school, and she said, my daughter's in 5th grade. I don't know what I did wrong. I told her if she got straight A's on a report card that I would take her to Disney World. And at the beginning of the quarter, her daughter came home and she was so motivated for like 3 days. She cracked the books and she was like into it, getting all her work done. And then slowly that waned until she was back to, the same old thing. So is there something to, rewarding a behavior earlier on than waiting such a long time?
Yes, absolutely. Because kids have short memories and it's hard for them to sustain that motivation. So you have to chunk the motivation. I noticed that last night you spent an hour getting really organized for your schedule this week. Reward that. I noticed that when you were reading that book, you were actually asking me questions about what it meant. You seemed really curious. Reward that. Again, I'm going to go back to rewarding the effort in the moment and also paying attention to the motivation in the moment. Our kids, we're all driven by rewards, but aren't we even more driven by attention? So when a parent or a teacher can just notice, wow, you spent a lot of time figuring that out, or that was really hard, but you kept at it. That feels so much better than just saying, oh, you got a good grade. Okay, here's $5. The kids are rewarded by the attention and the presence that they receive from their parents.
And I love the words you mentioned, I noticed. Why is that better than anything else?
Our kids want us to notice them. We want to be noticed, right? I mean, even as a parent, doesn't it feel amazing when a child says, Mom, I noticed that, you spent a lot of time making dinner, or I noticed that you're working really hard, versus, just a compliment. A compliment's almost an easier thing to do. Good job. Oh, that was great. Nice work. But be specific and be present with what they're doing.
Thanks, Rachna. I'm wondering, in your practice, do you ever see a difference between boys and girls in motivation?
Absolutely. In our culture, we have been teaching our girls to be perfect. And sometimes our girls are almost over-motivated, but to the point that if there's any perceived sense of failure, so let's say they get a B, somehow they think they're failing. And if their male counterpart got a B, they'd be like, oh, that's good enough. So again, I'm going to quote another study where 50% of economic majors start off as 50% male, 50% female. When the woman gets a B, they're twice as likely to drop out of that economics major. When they get a C, they're 4 times as likely to drop out of the economics major. Said the other way, the men, if they get a C, they're 4 times as likely to continue because, hey, I got a C. That's good enough. So I think with our girls, we need to teach them that perfection is not an option. That can't be the goal. So with girls, I'm almost noticing that it's almost all or nothing. And with boys, it's more of they're getting some of their sense of worth, through other things, whether it's sports or socially. So we do see a lot of differences between boys and girls.
How would a parent know that for example, we see a lot of kids that, they struggle with motivation a little bit, but part of it is due to their lack of organization and they have a hard time planning ahead. They tend to procrastinate. Their executive functioning skills. Versus they seem just really distraught. And no matter what the parent does, they just, I've noticed this even more with boys. They'll close the door to their room. They won't be available to talk. They kind of, shut themselves off. How does a parent know that it could be like an educational coach that can help with the executive functioning issues, or that it's something bigger, that the child may need therapy, or there's something else going on?
I think what you really want to look at is the distress also in situations outside of homework? So is it also happening with friends? Is it happening with family members? Is it happening on the football field or on the basketball court? So is it not just about academics? But also remember, ADHD, executive functioning issues, and anxiety are very tied together. It's a vicious cycle. So let's say you're inattentive and you're not very well organized, and you start looking around you and you feel like, wow, everyone else seems to know what they're doing. Then you start feeling more anxious. Then the more anxious you get, the more distracted you get. The more distracted you get, the more anxious you get. And then you're in a vicious cycle. So 80% of kids with ADHD, we're now finding, also have symptoms of anxiety. The reverse isn't necessarily true, but you have to look for both. It's often not an either or situation. So in terms of looking at it across settings, but also looking at it in terms of a both and situation.
That's an alarming statistic.
It is.
Great.
Thanks, Rachna.
And
Rochelle.
Yes. I have a couple more questions for you guys, if you don't mind me asking. I have a parent, and she's asking, what do you think of books like The Trouble with Boys that say our schools today are better suited to girls' success than boys?
I think in part that's true, especially at the grade school level, where it is about sitting at your desk, going through the different courses, maybe a little bit less of group learning, a little bit less of, vocalizing, verbalizing, being hands-on. I would say it's a little bit less true in the high school setting, where there do tend to be more group projects, more experiments. But again, I'm going to go back to it's a both and, because conversely, people can say, the more vocal you are in the grade school years, the more attention you get. And some of these girls who are more quiet or might have sort of an inattentive ADD sometimes they go under the radar.
Great. And I have another question, which kind of still falls into motivation. How do you get the child to get motivated again after they fell off and they're not able to play catch up?
That's a tough one because, right, we all get more motivated when we do better, we're more motivated to do it. But just like on a sports field, let's say you have a bad game, sometimes that actually can be more motivating for, I'm going to practice more and I'm going to do better next time. I think in our culture, we're a little bit afraid of struggle. And so that for us, struggle is seen as a sign of failure. But in a lot of other cultures, struggle is seen as a sign of grit. Okay, yeah, that was tough for me, but I'm going to get back on and I'm going to try more next time. So I think as a mindset, we can't see struggle as failure, but really more as an opportunity to try again.
Great. And can bullying lead to an academic shutdown for a student?
100%. I mean, bullying can lead to so much negative outcome. So whether that's social shutdown, academic shutdown, emotional shutdown, absolutely. If you stop caring, if you stop feeling like you're worthwhile, then it can affect your study skills, your performance in the classroom, and most importantly, just your level of engagement, right? You might be more withdrawn. The more withdrawn you are, the less you're going to be able to encode in a classroom setting.
That's a great point, Rachan. And to the other question, what do you do if your child, experiences failure and has a hard time getting back up? My experience has been that it really varies depending on the subject. For example, I found that kids can recover faster in classes that are not cumulative. For example, in English, where one thing doesn't really build upon another, like you're reading a different book each quarter, or you're working on a lesson in grammar and then next time it's something different. Mm-hmm. It's a lot different than in math or in a foreign language or in a math-based science where it's cumulative and one skill builds upon another. My experience has been that kids that fall behind in those subjects without help, they have a very, very hard time, no matter how much they try, to dig themselves out of that situation.
I agree.
Rochelle, any other questions that you have?
Not right now.
Okay, great. Rachna, what else is important for parents to know about the psychology behind motivation?
Yeah. So with motivation, it is about really trying to promote the growth mindset, that we don't have a set intelligence. It's not about, well, this is how you were born and you're either good at math or you're bad at math. You're good at reading or you're bad at reading. The research really shows that we can grow our minds, and we want kids to understand that just as they can grow athletically or socially, they can also grow intellectually. So we want to promote that growth mindset where failure is not seen as something bad. Mistakes are seen as something that you can learn from, where if you're getting feedback, you don't take it defensively. You're actually like, okay, this is something that I can grow from. We also really want to promote frustration tolerance. I mean, we don't allow, or we're afraid for our kids to get frustrated. Again, this helicopter parenting of trying to make lives easier for them, making their lunches, getting them set for the day. It might be frustrating for them if they forget their lunch one day, but let them have that experience and realize that they can get to the other side. We should not overfunction for our kids. And then also, we just really want to teach them about the neuroplasticity of the brain. The brain grows. And I really encourage parents to show kids YouTube videos about how the brain grows. Again, research shows that if we show our kids that the brain grows, they actually feel like they're in control of their own destiny.
Rachna, I wanted to ask you about Carol Dweck's book called Mindset. Do you think that would be helpful for parents?
I'm a big fan. So I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, and also Angela Duckworth's book called Grit. And again, this amazing study where when kids are praised on their effort, they actually are motivated to do more, versus when they're praised on, you're smart, they're oftentimes motivated to do less. So, either getting the book or Googling it. There are a lot of TED Talks. Dr. Dweck has given a TED Talk on grit and on mindset. Strongly encourage it.
And
excellent.
The strategies that you two have shared so far, is it too late to implement these strategies for a high school student?
Absolutely not. It's never too late. And remember, the way that development is what we're looking for a 5-year-old is different for an 8-year-old, from a 13-year-old, from an 18-year-old. So this is a constant discussion. Just because your 5-year-old is motivated doesn't mean you stop modeling or creating or talking about the growth mindset. The conversation shifts at different developmental stages. And so in high school, it's almost like you can have a little bit more of a cognitive, intellectual conversation with your teenager about, what does it mean to grow? What do you value? What do you value in the short term? What do you want to value 1 year from now? What do you value 5 years from now? Setting some of these goal-setting exercises can be really powerful. So it might mean, what do you want a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now? What do you want to be a month from now, 5 years from now? What do you want to do a month from now, 5 years from now?
And then I have a parent who, used the strategies that you mentioned, where you explain the growth mindset and how the brain grows, but her daughter still is not receptive and she becomes avoidant. What strategies would you recommend to that parent to, better suit her daughter in trying?
It's ongoing. It's not a one-time discussion. It is something that is days, weeks, months, years in the making. And I know that can be a little bit frustrating to hear, because we do want to have that app, like Ann said, or a pill, or like, okay, here are the instructions to be motivated. But it's such a complicated thing that it has to be an ongoing modeling, discussion, and experience.
Thanks, Rachna. Rochelle, do we have any other questions?
Yes. So you mentioned earlier that inattentive ADD can cause anxiety. Now, are there medications for that? Is there a cure?
So I never like to use the word cure. If there is ADD or anxiety, that's usually part of the child's temperament or personality. But again, it will manifest itself in different ways at different developmental stages. But absolutely, there's treatment. So sometimes that might involve medication. And when it's a combination of anxiety and ADHD, working with a very skilled physician in determining what that class of medication would be, where you're increasing the arousal level to help with the ADD, but not increasing it so much that the anxiety gets heightened. So again, working with a very skilled physician. But there are also a lot of cognitive behavioral techniques about how to self-soothe, how to notice when you're off task. So one of the most powerful interventions they've found for someone who is distractible is for them to notice that they're off task. So instead of everyone else saying, mom or dad or the teacher, Johnny, are you listening? Are you listening? For Johnny to start noticing, oh, I was off task. Let me get back on task. And again, no judgment involved in that. But the more he or she can notice being off task, the more mindful they're getting over that. And then we're increasing what we call our metacognition, our understanding of how we think. So cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm a big fan of, and also something called acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, which is, again, accepting how you are, but committing to another way of how you want to live your life. And they're just specific strategies.
Great. And I have a couple more questions for you both. One parent's asking, what is a reasonable expectation of the parent, teacher, and school relationship? Now, should we expect teachers to increase the recognition of child's effort?
I think if you can let the teacher know that you're working on praising effort at home. Rachna used the two words, I've noticed. I love those words. I think those words are great in dealing with teachers. When I was a teacher and parents came to me, with guns blazing, it made me feel defensive. But when people came to me and said, I'm working on this at home, I took it as, oh, you're doing that at home? Let me help you in the classroom. So if you can start out with, I've noticed that Johnny's really responding well when I praise his effort. Now, I know you have a large class, but perhaps we could work together on this. I would absolutely let the teacher know what you're doing. Teachers want to help. They absolutely do. And if they can have a more motivated student, it's definitely better for them in the classroom.
Absolutely. And, it's hard to notice it as parents, as educators, as a psychologist. Sometimes we just want to comment on the final outcome. But when I do testing, whether I'm looking at dyslexia or executive functioning, whenever I'm doing the testing, I'm really noticing their effort. And then I notice their smile and then their desire to do better, versus if I say, wow, that math problem was really easy for you. They'll just seem to pass it on. So it takes effort on our parts as the adults in these kids' lives to actually slow down and really observe what you're seeing. And then if you can ask the teachers just to be a partner in that. We're not asking them to observe all day, but can they make one observation statement or comment? I think it will really stick with the student.
Thanks, Rachna. And Rochelle, we have time for one more question.
Yes, one last question from a parent who's having trouble getting their child to appreciate the importance of school together. Now that the student is in high school, he now just gives I don't know answers when parents ask him to set goals and think about his future. Now, is this just a maturity thing that the parents will have to wait out, or should they try to continue to discuss, the importance of school in the future?
I'm wondering if that child might be going into shutdown mode. If they are going into just, I don't know, I would probably want to investigate just, if there's a mood issue that might be an undercurrent here. if there's feelings of low self-worth or that nothing seems to matter. So this is where you might want to get outside consultation or help, whether it's an executive functioning coach, whether it's a tutor, whether it's a psychologist, to really get at what's going on there.
Yeah, you're right. Peeling back the layers of the onion, because our kids can be complicated for sure. And it's hard to know at face value what is going on underneath all those layers. Well, Rachna, this has been just fabulous. I really want to thank you so much for being a part of our webinar today on motivation.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. And I wanted to give everyone our contact information. Rachna mentioned pediatricians and other folks that help kids. If you need a referral, just shoot me an email and I can give you that information. My email is ann@ectutoring.com. And Rachna's is Dr. Dr. Varia, Varia, at mindwell.us. Feel free to contact us at any time. Thank you so much for attending and have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thank you.